Ladies and gentlemen, the world is not merely a battlefield of flesh and blood, but of spirit and will. While we walk among men, we must never forget that not all who bear the form of humanity are governed by the same light. There are those among us who drain, distort, and deceive, some through mere malice, others through the unseen hand of darker influences. These are the energy vampires, the soul drainers, and at their most extreme, those whose very bodies are but puppets for something far worse. How then can we recognize them? Must they bear glowing eyes, speak in unnatural tongues, or recoil from sacred symbols? No, my friends, the truth is far more subtle, and thus far more dangerous. Observe the atmosphere they carry. These individuals may not always wear a sinister grin, but in their presence you feel inexplicably weakened. They do not simply take your time, they sap your joy, your resolve, and even your sense of self. Their words, though sometimes honeyed, leave behind the bitterness of confusion, self-doubt, or despair. Consider their effect on order and truth. Those influenced by malevolent forces despise clarity. They muddy discussions, twist meanings, and revel in endless contradictions. Their arguments do not aim at understanding but at dismantling certainty itself. If you have ever left a conversation feeling that the very ground of reality has shifted beneath your feet, you may have encountered such a soul. Watch for the hallmarks of inversion. What is good they mock. What is wicked they excuse. They laugh at virtue and call it weakness, yet celebrate cruelty as strength. They make the sacred profane and the profane sacred, delighting in their rebellion not because it builds but because it destroys. They loathe true joy. Not pleasure, mind you, pleasure they may seek in abundance, though it never satisfies them. But the quiet, steady glow of peace, love, and gratitude, this they cannot stand. They may mock it, undermine it, or try to convince you it does not exist, but at their core they despise it because they cannot possess it. They seek dominion, whether through fear, manipulation, or relentless need. An energy vampire will make you responsible for their moods, their wants, and their endless crises. A demon-possessed soul will go further. They will aim to break your spirit entirely, to make you question all that is good, even to doubt the light itself. And most tellingly, they recoil at true authority, the authority not of men, but of the divine. Speak truth in their presence, and watch them bristle. Invoke the sacred and see their unease. Darkness cannot help but tremble at the presence of light, though it may hide its fear beneath laughter or scorn. So what are we to do? Do we flee? No, not always. Sometimes the battle is not ours to fight. But we must be wise. We must guard our souls as one guards a fire in the wind, neither foolishly exposing it nor timidly smothering it. We must recognize these forces for what they are, not always monstrous but always hungry. And most of all, we must stand firm, for the greatest defense against the draining touch of darkness is not fear, nor even cleverness, but an unshakable hold upon the truth. Hold fast, my friends, and be watchful. The night is not yet over, but neither is the dawn far off. Some individuals move through life like a flame, warming and illuminating those around them. Others, however, seem to carry with them an unseen weight, a force that drains the energy, peace, and joy of those who come too close. This draining presence is not always overt, nor is it always easy to explain. One does not need to witness an outburst of rage or malice to feel its effects. Often it is something far more insidious. It is the sensation of leaving a conversation inexplicably tired, of feeling one's thoughts clouded, of a sudden and inexplicable heaviness settling over the soul. These individuals do not simply ask for attention, they demand it, though often without words. Their presence alone shifts the atmosphere in a room, as though something vital has been siphoned away, leaving behind a dullness, a sense of unease. They do not merely engage in conversation, they pull others into an unspoken contract of emotional labor. It is not just that they speak of their woes, everyone has burdens to share, but that their burdens become an inescapable vortex. Even when they seem to be listening, they are in truth feeding. At times, this feeding is subtle. They might frame their neediness as vulnerability, their self-centeredness as sensitivity. They may even appear charming, wearing a mask of affability that disguises the slow siphoning of another's vitality. Yet when one steps away, there is a lingering hollowness, as though something once bright has dimmed. This is the essence of the draining presence, an interaction that does not nourish but depletes, not because of what is said, but because of the nature of the one speaking. Some of these individuals operate with intent, though many do not even recognize what they are doing. They may not understand why relationships crumble around them, why their companions withdraw, why their presence, though tolerated, is never truly welcomed. But the pattern is undeniable. Wherever they go, energy dissipates, laughter fades, and the vibrancy of life is sapped away. The effects of such individuals are not merely psychological. They do not merely burden the mind with their demands, they affect the very essence of one's being. The draining presence can leave a person physically weary, emotionally raw, and spiritually disoriented. Time spent with them may begin with casual ease but ends in the inexplicable sense that something has been lost. And if one remains too long within their orbit, this loss becomes greater, hope weakens, purpose wavers, and even the strongest convictions begin to feel strangely hollow. It is difficult to describe precisely why this happens, only that it does. Their presence unsettles something deep within, something beyond words. It is as though they carry with them a force that is antithetical to life itself, a shadow that dims the light in others. Whether through relentless negativity, ceaseless self-absorption, or an unseen spiritual influence, they take without giving, drain without replenishing, and leave others diminished in ways that only become clear after they have gone. Truth is not merely a collection of facts, nor is it a matter of perspective. It is the solid ground upon which reason, morality, and even sanity itself must stand. Yet there are those who do not seek truth, nor even oppose it directly, but instead seek to twist and distort it until it becomes unrecognizable. Their goal is not to replace falsehood with truth, but to unravel truth altogether, to leave nothing certain, nothing firm, and nothing worth standing upon. This is the way of those who distort truth, whether by conscious manipulation or by an unseen influence that works through them. Their method is rarely as simple as lying outright. A direct falsehood can be identified, challenged, and disproven, but distortion is a subtler, more insidious force. It takes fragments of reality and rearranges them into something that feels plausible, yet is ultimately deceptive. It thrives on half-truths, selective omissions, and misleading implications. A sentence may contain only facts, yet the conclusion it leads to is false. A discussion may appear rational, yet its purpose is to confuse rather than clarify. This distortion operates most effectively in conversation, where it manifests as endless argumentation that leads nowhere. One may begin with a clear and simple truth, yet through a series of carefully placed questions, irrelevant details, and seemingly profound contradictions, the truth is soon buried beneath a mountain of uncertainty. A person engaging with such an individual may feel at first that they are having an ordinary debate, but as time passes they realize something is off. No matter how well they articulate their points, no matter how clearly they present the facts, the conversation never reaches a resolution. Instead, it spirals endlessly, leaving them exhausted and unsure of what they once knew. One of the most dangerous aspects of this distortion is its effect on moral clarity. It does not argue that good is evil and evil is good in plain terms, for that would be too obvious. Instead, it complicates, rationalizes, and justifies until the distinction between the two is blurred beyond recognition. Those who distort truth will not tell you that betrayal is noble, but they will insist that loyalty is conditional. They will not declare that cruelty is right, but they will suggest that kindness is naive. They do not seek to build a new moral order, but to break down the one that already exists, until all that remains is ambiguity, confusion, and an open door for darkness to take root. To the one who is unfamiliar with this kind of deception, it may seem like mere intellectual play, perhaps frustrating, but not truly dangerous. However, the consequences are not merely philosophical. A person who loses their grasp on truth does not merely become uncertain, they become vulnerable. They lose their ability to discern what is real, what is good, and what is worth defending. And in that state they are easily led, not because they lack intelligence, but because they no longer trust their own ability to see clearly. There is a peculiar trick of darkness, not merely to oppose the good, but to turn it upside down, to make virtue seem like folly and vice appear as wisdom. This is not the crude rejection of morality, but its inversion, where what was once cherished as noble is now ridiculed, and what was once condemned as depraved is now celebrated. It does not happen in a single moment, nor is it always obvious. The inversion of morality creeps in slowly, adjusting itself to the sensitivities of the time, finding ways to make corruption appear not only acceptable but desirable. It begins with subtle shifts in language, where words that once carried clear meaning are softened, redefined, or weaponized against their original intent. Cowardice becomes prudence, selfishness becomes self-care, indulgence becomes freedom. At the same time, the highest virtues, humility, discipline, patience, are framed as weakness or as obstacles to personal fulfillment. The man who restrains his impulses is repressed. The woman who submits to duty is a fool. What was once seen as a struggle for righteousness is now portrayed as pointless suffering, while the abandonment of principle is called enlightenment. This inversion extends beyond mere words and ideas. It seeps into the way people behave, the way they treat each other, the way they justify their actions. The proud demand admiration, while accusing the humble of arrogance. The corrupt call the honest naive. The cruel believe themselves strong, while the gentle are mocked as weak. The old virtues which once required effort and sacrifice are dismissed as outdated and unnecessary, while the basest instincts are not only indulged but upheld as a kind of authenticity. People are encouraged to be true to themselves, but only if that means abandoning the restraints of conscience and obligation. As morality turns upon itself, those who resist this shift are not merely debated, they are treated as obstacles to progress. The good man is no longer just old-fashioned, he is a problem. His very existence is an accusation against those who have embraced inversion, and they will not tolerate the reminder of what they have abandoned. The honest are called judgmental, the disciplined are called rigid, the faithful are called oppressive. If goodness cannot be mocked away, it must be silenced. And if it cannot be silenced, it must be made to look indistinguishable from evil. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this inversion is that it does not always come with open rebellion or outright hatred. It often wears a smile, speaking of tolerance, kindness, and personal freedom. But beneath the surface, it is a war against the very foundations of truth. It convinces people that virtue is a burden and that sin is liberation. It makes them feel wise while leading them into folly. And once the mind has fully accepted the reversal, what was once shocking becomes normal, and what was once unthinkable becomes law. The world is turned upside down, and those who stand upon their heads believe themselves to be the ones finally seeing clearly. There is a kind of person, or rather a kind of force working through a person, that cannot stand true joy. It is not that they dislike happiness in the way a melancholic soul might struggle to grasp it, nor that they are simply bitter about their own misfortunes. No, this is something far deeper, something visceral. True joy unsettles them, disturbs them, even enrages them. They may not always recognize this within themselves, but their reactions reveal the truth. Where joy is present, they feel compelled to undermine it, dismiss it, or twist it into something lesser. This is because true joy is not mere pleasure, nor is it momentary excitement. It is not loud or boastful, nor does it demand attention. True joy is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in things beyond circumstance: gratitude, love, meaning, and an unwavering connection to what is good. It does not depend on wealth, power, or the fleeting approval of others, and for this reason, those who are empty inside cannot understand it. More than that, they resent it. It reminds them of their own hollow state, of something they have lost or rejected, and so their instinct is to spoil it in whatever way they can. They might do this with mockery, laughing at what is pure and good, trying to make it seem ridiculous or naive. A person who expresses sincere gratitude is treated as foolish. One who finds joy in simplicity is called childish, and one who believes in something greater than themselves is labeled delusional. If joy cannot be ridiculed, then it is attacked in more subtle ways, through cynicism, through carefully placed doubts, through suggestions that it is not real, that it cannot last, that those who feel it are deceiving themselves. This hatred of joy often hides behind a mask of sophistication. Those who carry it may consider themselves worldly, pragmatic, or even wise. They claim to see through the illusions that others fall for, as if joy itself were a kind of trick, a facade that must eventually crumble. They pity those who experience it, seeing them as simpletons who have not yet learned the hard truths of existence. And yet, deep down, their scorn is not born from knowledge but from envy. They tell themselves that joy is an illusion because they do not know how to attain it. They reject it because it rejects them. In some cases, this rejection turns into something more active, an effort to steal joy from others. A person of true joy unsettles them too much to be left alone. They will poke at them, test them, try to provoke anger or despair, anything to prove that the joy is not real. If they cannot share in it, they will try to drag it down, to turn it into something else: cynicism, indulgence, distraction, or numbness. They cannot tolerate the presence of something so bright, so whole, so utterly beyond their grasp. And so they do what they have always done. They seek to dim the light. There are those who move through the world with an insatiable need to control. This is not the natural desire for order or stability, nor the noble duty of guiding others toward what is good. It is something darker, something that does not seek to build but to dominate, to bend the will of others, not for their benefit but for the satisfaction of power itself. The desire for control is not always loud, nor is it always enforced through brute force. In its most dangerous form, it is subtle, creeping into relationships, conversations, and even thoughts, until a person no longer realizes they are being shaped by another's will. Those who hunger for control rarely present themselves as tyrants. In fact, many of them claim the opposite. They do not demand obedience outright, they convince, manipulate, guilt, and pressure. They play the victim when it serves them, twisting kindness into obligation. They make others feel that their happiness, their peace, even their very existence depends upon keeping the controller pleased. If someone dares to resist, the response is not a fair debate or an acceptance of disagreement, but rather an escalation, perhaps in the form of emotional withdrawal, perhaps in a sudden outburst of anger, or perhaps in the careful planting of doubt that makes the other question themselves entirely. The most effective controllers do not shackle the body, but the mind. They make a person second-guess their own perceptions, wonder if they are overreacting, or feel selfish for asserting their own needs. They entangle themselves so deeply in another's sense of self that separating from them feels like severing a limb. If they cannot control through fear, they will control through guilt. If guilt fails, they will use flattery, charm, or even love, whatever tool is necessary to keep another under their influence. And if none of these methods work, they will turn to destruction, ensuring that if they cannot have control, then no one else can either. Their greatest weapon is the illusion that their control is for the good of those they seek to dominate. They may claim to be protecting, guiding, or helping, all while tightening their grip. They may appear wise, generous, even self-sacrificing, but beneath the surface, their sacrifices always serve their own purposes. True generosity expects nothing in return, but the generosity of a controller is a debt, a silent demand that will be collected when the time is right. This desire for control does not limit itself to individuals. It seeps into families, friendships, workplaces, and even entire societies. The more one submits to it, the more it grows and the stronger its grip becomes. And yet, the paradox of control is that it is never truly satisfied. No matter how much influence they gain, those who crave control always fear losing it. They can never rest, never trust, never love in the truest sense, for real love requires the one thing they refuse: to accept the freedom of another.